Welcome to the Herbal Hour. I'm your host, Stephen Horne, and our topic today is what to do when your thyroid needs kelp, or maybe I should say help. But either way, we're going to talk about natural solutions to thyroid disorders. Thyroid disorders are extremely common in the United States and are often underdiagnosed, meaning that many people have moderate thyroid problems that are not being noticed and not getting diagnosed and treated. Thyroid disorders are also extremely common worldwide. So today we're going to talk about both hypo and hyperactive thyroid disorders, as well as some tips on dealing with thyroid nodules. But for starters, let's learn a little bit about the thyroid and what it does. Now this is a little diagram showing the thyroid, which sits right under your larynx or your voice box and wraps around your trachea or your throat right at the base of your neck. And associated with the thyroid are some smaller glands called the parathyroid glands. Now the thyroid functions include regulating your metabolism and your body weight, helping your energy levels and your sleep cycles. The thyroid also plays a role in fertility and menstruation. So the thyroid is really important for regulating the glandular system in women. The thyroid aids memory and concentration. It helps your body regulate cholesterol. It aids the health of skin and hair, and it also helps to strengthen the bones. So you see, your thyroid does a lot of things to help your body in a variety of different ways. This is why thyroid disorders cause basically a cascade of many kinds of symptoms throughout the body that basically, as you start to recognize those patterns, you'll start to pick up moderate thyroid disorders even if they're not showing up on lab tests. Now, to understand a little about how the thyroid hormones work, we've got this little diagram that shows that the hypothalamus, which monitors the blood for various hormone levels, basically when it notices a need for thyroid hormones, it releases TRH, the thyroid-releasing hormone, which travels through a little channel to the pituitary, where it stimulates the release of the thyroid-stimulating hormone, or TSH, also known as thyrotropin. Okay, then that goes into the bloodstream and attaches to receptor sites in the thyroid, where it stimulates an enzyme that causes the body to start producing thyroxine, or T4. There's another form of this called T3. We're going to talk about the difference in a minute. T4 travels to other tissues in the body where it actually gets converted into T3. Now, the thyroid does make some T3, but most of what it makes is T4, which is then converted into T3, the active form in target cells and in tissues. Cortisol basically regulates the conversion of T3 to T4, and insulin actually interferes with the conversion of T4 to T3. So basically, if you have high insulin levels, you're going to have what you might call a functional hypothyroid, meaning that you have thyroid hormones in the blood, but they're not getting converted into the active form, so you still have symptoms of low thyroid. Now let's look first of all more closely at the TRH and the TSH. Again, the TRH is released by the hypothalamus to stimulate the pituitary to release TSH. TRH is a tripeptide of glutamine, proline, and histidine. Now that means that those are three amino acids that are combined together. And the TSH then travels through the blood to stimulate the thyroid to produce more T4 and T3. So let's talk a little bit about this T4 to T3 conversion. As I mentioned, T4 is the inactive or kind of storage form of the hormone. So the thyroid makes about 75% of the hormones it creates are the T4. So the T4 is then circulating in the blood to be ready when there's a need for a boost of energy. Okay, so basically it's just sitting there waiting to be converted. So when the body needs more energy, it converts the T4 to the T3, and then that gets the metabolism revved up and gets moving. Now, although there are a number of places where this T4 to T3 conversion takes place, the primary place this takes place is in the liver. So interestingly enough, you can have a kind of thyroid problem that actually is related to your liver. So if your liver's not working well, then you may have a poor T4 to T3 conversion, and again you have this kind of functional hypothyroid, where you have your blood tests show that your hormones are normal, but you have symptoms of low thyroid. So you can have that from both high insulin levels, that's eating a diet loaded with sugar and carbohydrates and so forth, or you can have it because your liver is kind of sluggish and having problems. Now there's one more hormone from the thyroid that often gets overlooked, and that's calcitonin. And calcitonin is basically a hormone that decreases levels of blood calcium by moving the calcium out of the blood and into the bones to be deposited and stored. Now, those little teeny parathyroid glands that sit on the thyroid produce another hormone that basically raises blood calcium by drawing calcium out of the bone and back into the blood. So this is called a hormonal axis. There's a lot of these in the body where you have these two hormones that are designed, that work as antagonists to basically try to keep something in balance. So those two hormones are working to keep the level of calcium in your bones and your blood stable. So that's one of the reasons why the thyroid is also important for maintaining healthy bones. Now, there are a number of thyroid disorders that you can get. And the first one is the hypothyroid, which is the underactive thyroid, where you're not producing enough thyroid hormone. And the most common cause of hypoactive thyroid is Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which we'll talk about briefly in a moment. You can also have a hyperactive thyroid or an overactive thyroid. The most common overactive thyroid problem is Graves' disease. There's also postpartum thyroiditis, and there can be other causes of a hyperactive thyroid, but that means that there's too much thyroid hormone being produced. You can get nodules on your thyroid, which are like benign growths that are non-cancerous, and the thyroid can also develop tumors, which we're not going to really try to talk too much about, because the natural treatment for cancer is a really, really complex subject and way beyond what we could cover in a short video like this. Now, hypothyroid is the most common disorder, and here are some of the symptoms of hypothyroid. The first one is just feeling tired. And with that goes a mental sluggishness. Since the thyroid helps to stimulate the brain and memory and concentration, you just don't feel mentally alert. You'll also tend to have poor muscle tone, low body temperature. Now that's a big one. The moment I shake someone's hands and it's in the summertime and their hands are cool, I immediately suspect they have a thyroid problem. Intolerance to cold. Rough, dry skin. The thyroid plays a major role in keeping your skin soft and moist and healthy. Weight gain. Since your thyroid regulates metabolism and the burning of fuel, when your thyroid's low, you tend to store calories instead of burning them. When it gets more serious, you can get kind of puffiness in the face, and you can also feel depressed. Low thyroid is one of the major causes of depression. There are lots of others, but that's one of the major ones. Now, earlier, I likened the thyroid to the gas pedal in your car. So when you have a low thyroid, it's sort of like your idle in your car is set too low. You know, when you're not like pushing on the gas, then your engine is still running. It's just running at a much lower rate. When you push on the gas, it revs up the engine. Well, if you're idling too low, then the engine sputters. It may even die on you when you're in idle. And when you step on the gas to get some acceleration, it doesn't have much power. It accelerates slowly. It doesn't like rev up really well. And that's exactly what happens when your thyroid is underactive. It's like your metabolic engine is sputtering, stalling, and when you need that extra burst of energy, you basically can't seem to pull that boost of energy together, because your engine just doesn't rev up very well. Now, hypothyroid may be one of the most commonly overlooked health problems in the world today. There was a study that was done, and actually I'm going to cover that later, but it was found that as much as 10% of the population may have undiagnosed hypothyroidism. In other words, this is not just the people who already have been diagnosed as hypothyroid, which is a lot, but the ones who haven't been diagnosed, 10% of them may have problems with low thyroid. And this is a problem that primarily affects women. 1 in 5 women will likely develop hypothyroid during her lifetime. So 20% of all women wind up with low thyroid. So this is a big problem for a lot of ladies. Now, men can have it too, but like I say, it's much more common in women. Now, there are a lot of disorders that may have a hypothyroid component to them. Now, when I say a component, I'm not saying that the hypothyroid is the only cause, but that recovering from these disorders may require getting the thyroid back in line again. In other words, it's a contributing factor in the development of these diseases. And these include arteriosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries, arthritis, cancer, especially cancers of the breast, the uterus, and the prostate, chronic fatigue, coldness in the extremities, that's, being easily chilled, having cold hands and feet, constipation, fatigue, fibromyalgia, which often includes an iodine deficiency and a thyroid problem, headaches, high cholesterol. Low thyroid is one of the major causes of high cholesterol. Menstrual disorders, a lot of PMS, menstrual irregularity, infertility, etc., has a thyroid component to it. Ovarian cysts, poor memory, difficulty concentrating goes with that. Reoccurrent infections. Iodine was traditionally applied to cuts as a disinfectant. Well, it acts as part of your body's ability to fight infection too. So it affects your immune system if you have low levels of iodine and a low thyroid. And a lot of skin disorders may have a thyroid component, including psoriasis, eczema, acne, like I mentioned, just plain dry, rough skin may be a sign of hypothyroid. Now, here's a little study that was done with hypothyroidism and arteriosclerosis using 2,550 subjects. It was found that subclinical hypothyroidism, that means that a low thyroid that was just not quite low enough to justify medical intervention, but on the low side, was associated with a 260% increase in the prevalence of heart disease. Now, there's an important reason for this. Iodine basically keeps fats emulsified. It basically helps the body burn, metabolize, and utilize fats and keep fats in a water-soluble condition. There's a book that I read many years ago called Coronaries, Cholesterol, and Chlorine by Dr. Joseph Price. And Dr. Price basically was looking for why all of a sudden, shortly after the turn of the last century, starting from about 1900 to 1920, we started seeing massive development of this problem of hardening of the arteries, which was relatively unknown before that time. Prior to 1900, the current problem we have with coronary heart disease and heart attacks was just not there. In fact, there were heart problems like congestive heart failure and so forth, but the concept of the heart attack was just virtually unknown. And he was looking for why this suddenly started happening. And what he wound up doing is correlating it to the chlorination of water supplies. So what he found is that chlorine, which is in the same column on the periodic table of elements as iodine, basically makes fats gummy. And it's also a free radical that damages the artery linings, causing cholesterol to deposit on them. And he did research using chickens, which are often used to test theories about hardening of the arteries. And he fed 2 groups of chickens, the same diet, high-fat, low-fiber diet that's considered to be artery clogging. One group he fed purified water, the other group he fed ordinary tap water. The tap water group developed hardening of arteries. The group fed purified water did not. No hardening of the arteries. He basically took the group that had no hardening of the arteries and basically divided it in half, started feeding half of them tap water, the half he fed tap water, again developed hardening of their arteries. So he found that chlorination of water was actually the major thing that is causing the illness that's taking half of the American people's lives and problems worldwide. Well, one of the things chlorine does is it displaces iodine. But the good news is iodine displaces chlorine. So basically getting more iodine actually helps prevent hardening of the arteries and heart disease in both men and women. So how do we determine if you have a low thyroid? You can do blood tests, and blood tests will pick up that you have a low thyroid, but they aren't always accurate in the sense that the blood tests may not show subclinical hypothyroidism, they may not show functional hypothyroidism and so forth. So one of the best ways to determine if you have low thyroid is to test your basal body temperature, which we're going to talk about how to do in a minute. And that is to see if your metabolic engine is running on the cool side. And with that, you can observe thyroid-related symptoms. And if you see a lot of thyroid-related symptoms and you have a low body temperature, then you basically go on a program to boost your thyroid and see if that helps your health problems to improve. And most of the time, it will. So here's how to test your basal body temperature. Basically, first of all, what you're doing is you're trying to determine the level at which your engine is idling, so to speak, your metabolic engine. So it tells the amount of energy your body is burning at rest, measured by your temperature when you're first waking up in the morning. So your body's at kind of its lowest energy point. You're just barely waking up, and your engine has been kind of idling at night. And so you're checking the temperature to see what temperature you have. The basal metabolism is largely determined by the hormones secreted from your thyroid and adrenal glands. So if the big cause of most people are going to have a low basal body temperature because of thyroid problems, but adrenal issues could be tied in there. That's why this test should also be looked at along with thyroid-related symptoms to see if that's the problem. So here's how you do this. You use an ordinary thermometer for measuring body temperature. Now, you can use the old-fashioned thermometers like that you put in the mouth or the rectum, but they have these new thermometers, and I don't see why you shouldn't use one of the ones that check in the ear or across the forehead or whatever. But place the thermometer on your nightstand before you go to bed. First thing in the morning, before you get out of bed, while you're still lying in bed, reach over and get that thermometer and take your temperature. If you're using the old-fashioned kind of thermometer, you're supposed to stick it under your armpit for 10 minutes to measure your temperature. If you're using one of the newer thermometers, just take your temperature according to the instructions on the thing. You do this for 5 days in a row and then take an average of your morning temperature. So if your average temperature on those 5 days is lower than 97.8, then you probably have a thyroid condition. Now, there are some special instructions for women who want to do this. For women, the temperature should be taken starting the second day of menstruation. So the day after your period starts, you start doing this. And the reason is because with women, there's a temperature rise that occurs around the time of ovulation. So you ovulate on the other end of your period. So you have a 28-day cycle. The first day of menstruation, 14 days later, you're going to ovulate. So you start the second day of menstruation and you do it for 5 days. Now, it's okay if you miss a day and have to take another day, just as long as you do it within that 13-day time frame before you ovulate to get an accurate reading of what your temperature is. Now, assuming that your body temperature is low, okay, then you look and you go, okay, do you also have other symptoms? Are you tired? Do you get chilled easily? Are you cold? Does your brain kind of feel kind of like foggy? You're a little bit depressed or lethargic? Is your skin dry and rough? Are you having problems with weight? If you're having several of those other symptoms, not all of them, you don't have to have all of them, but if you're having several of those other symptoms, then it's very likely that you have low thyroid. Now, one of the things that could be causing this low thyroid is Hashimoto's thyroiditis, because this is the most common cause. And itis means inflammation, so thyroiditis is inflammation of the thyroid. Now, this is an autoimmune condition named after the guy who discovered it, Hashimoto, okay? That basically, you're showing high levels of antibodies in the blood to an enzyme called thyroid peroxidase. So thyroid peroxidase is the enzyme that liberates iodine to attach it to the tyrosine to produce the thyroid hormones. So if your levels of this enzyme are low because your body is basically taking down the levels of that enzyme, then you're going to have a poor conversion of iodine into thyroxine. Now, TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone from the pituitary, that enhances that enzyme, thyroid peroxidase. So basically the antibodies in the blood are counteracting the effect of the TSH from your thyroid, and that's what's causing the problem. Now, medically, the way Hashimoto's is treated is no different from the way that you treat any other hypothyroid condition. They give you thyroid hormones, okay? Now, the interesting thing about when you take the medical thyroid hormones or any other kind of medical hormones is they really aren't the body's natural hormones, okay? They're isomers of the hormones. To understand this concept a little better, hormones basically don't work by chemical composition. They work by molecular shape. Just like when you put a key into a lock, it's the shape of the key that determines whether the key is going to be able to open the lock or not. So it doesn't matter whether the key is made out of silver or gold or copper or lead or zinc or whatever. As long as the key has the right shape, it's going to work in the lock. Well, you can make chemical compounds that have a close enough molecular shape that they will activate receptor sites in the body for different hormones, but they aren't the same chemical composition as the body's natural hormones. This is one of the biggest problems with synthetic medical hormone therapy, is that you're basically using a slightly altered substance, which tends to create side effects because it doesn't work exactly the same way as your body's natural hormones. Now, traditionally, one of the ways that native people got the iodine they needed, got the thyroid hormone, was they actually would eat the glands of the animals. They would eat the adrenal glands, they would eat the thyroid gland when they slaughtered an animal. And so basically they were eating what we call now glandulars. So people would get like today can get like freeze-dried desiccated thyroid. There is a natural thyroid hormone that's available, but most doctors won't prescribe it. And I actually think there's problems with getting it in the marketplace because the FDA just recently came down on the whole issue of bioidentical hormones, basically saying there's no difference between bioidentical hormones and these synthetic hormone analogs. or isomers that are being used in drug medicine. I think that's because the FDA basically, is all staffed by people who come out of the pharmaceutical industry and the food manufacturing industry. So it's like the fox policing the chicken coop. They have vested interests in protecting the drug industry, and these kind of bioidentical things threaten them. So these are the kind of, when we go to a natural therapy, these are the things that we can do for both Hashimoto's and for just basically hypothyroid conditions in general. First thing we want to look at is iodine supplementation, because one of the most common reasons why thyroid is low is because you're not getting enough iodine, or the iodine is being displaced by chlorine and other chemicals. There are also nutritional supplements and herbs that can affect thyroid function and help to boost it. And also there's emotional healing issues that can be involved in thyroid problems that may also need to be dealt with. So we'll start by talking about iodine, because this is the first thing that you should try if you have any kind of hypothyroid condition, including Hashimoto's. Iodine obviously is absolutely essential for the production of the thyroid hormone, but it's one of the rarer elements in the Earth's crust. It's 62nd in abundance. It's actually in very low levels in inland foods, in inland plants and animals. It's very high concentrations are found in foods from the sea. So you get a lot of iodine in fish, shellfish, and seaweeds. 90% of Americans are not getting enough iodine. Now, this is according to people who are doing what are called iodine saturation tests, where you basically take a person's, and you give them a really high dose of iodine, and then you measure how much of that iodine they secrete in their urine over the next, I think is 24 to 48 hours. Now, so if you give people this huge dose of iodine, if the body is already saturated with iodine, it'll flush most of that iodine out because it doesn't need it. But if the body hangs on to most of that iodine, well, that means that the body was really low in iodine. And so when 90% of the people who are given this test wind up showing that they absorb a considerable amount of iodine, meaning that their system just is not getting enough iodine. Now, one of the reasons why this is taking place in modern society, even though we have iodized salt, which is supposed to be fixing this, but a lot of people don't eat as much salt anymore, and you don't necessarily know whether any particular food that's salted is salted with just plain salt or iodized salt, is we have iodine robbers. We have chemical compounds that are pushing iodine out of our system. Now, iodine is a halogen. So there's a column on the periodic table of elements where you have elements that have the same electrical properties, and the halogens include iodine, chlorine, bromine, and fluorine. Chlorine forms chlorides, bromine forms bromides, fluorine forms fluorides. All of those chemicals kick iodine out of your body. Also, mercury kicks iodine out of your body. Unfermented soy products kick iodine out of your body. And also salicylates actually interfere with iodine, which includes aspirin, but also salicylin-bearing plants. So that's not likely to be a big problem for most people. The big problem is the halogens. Obviously, we've got all this chlorinated water. We shower in chlorinated water. You don't even have to drink chlorinated water. Just chlorine is a gas, so when you're showering or bathing in chlorinated water, you're inhaling chlorine into your body. When you get into a hot tub or a swimming pool, they're either going to be treating that with chlorine or even worse with bromine, because bromine is even more irritating to the body than chlorine, and you're going to absorb that through your skin. Years ago, they used iodine as a dough conditioner in bread, and then there was this scare about iodine because of some iodine-containing drugs that turned out to have problems. And so they quit using iodine in bread, and they started using bromide instead as a dough conditioner. So you used to get your RDA of iodine from 2 slices of commercial bread. Now you get the same amount of bromide, which kicks that amount of iodine out of your system. Mercury, of course, is a big thing. If you have a lot of amalgam fillings, quote unquote silver fillings, which are really 50% mercury, you're going to get mercury in your system through that. One of the problems now with ocean fish foods is that a lot of shellfish, a lot of seafood now has high levels of mercury in it because of the industrial pollution going into our oceans. And so although you're getting iodine from it, it's also kicking iodine out of your system at the same time. And soy, a lot of people are eating a lot of soy products, and soy does actually interfere with your thyroid and iodine production if you overconsume it. Now, anything in moderation is going to be fine, but too much soy is not good for your thyroid. So to get more iodine in our diet, we should look, first of all, at dietary things. Fish and other seafoods from non-polluted waters, basically deep ocean fish that are harvested from the deep oceans, or from clear waters like up in Alaska and so forth are good. Sea vegetables, various seaweeds, which we'll talk about in a minute. Natural salts. Now, natural salts all contain iodine. These are unprocessed salts like the pink real salt from Redmond, Utah, which is the one I use, but the health food stores now carry lots of these. And of course, you can also take iodine supplements. Now, the herbs that we usually use for iodine are the seaweeds predominantly, or what we call sea vegetables. And kelp, which is, when your thyroid needs kelp, going back to the title of our program, is probably one of the big ones. Kelp actually contains iodine bonded to tyrosine. So basically, kelp contains almost a precursor to the thyroid hormone, which makes it one of the best seaweeds for feeding your thyroid. Right behind that is dulse, which is a great source of iodine. Irish moss, bladderwrack, kombu, nori, wakame. A lot of health food stores now carry us various kinds of seaweeds. You can sprinkle kelp, some of the other things into soups, stews, whatever, and it's going to up your iodine intake. One of the few land plants that's rich in iodine is black walnut. So particularly if you get a concentrated black walnut, you're going to get some good iodine content from that as well. There are also iodine supplements. A traditional iodine supplement they used to use to treat low thyroid, and which actually is still quite effective, is called Lugol's solution. I've never tasted it, but I understand it tastes pretty bad. It's 10% potassium iodide and 5% iodine. There's also a pill form of that same thing called iodoral, which many people are using now as an iodine supplement. There are also nutrients that you can use to help feed a low thyroid to help it produce more thyroid hormone. And obviously the first one is the amino acid L-tyrosine, because this thyroid hormone is composed of iodine bonded to L-tyrosine. Selenium and zinc are used in the process of making thyroid hormones. Vitamin D, vitamin E, and good fats all help to stimulate the thyroid to work better. So like having a spoonful of coconut oil in the morning actually is stimulating to the thyroid and helps boost the production of thyroid hormones. Now, traditionally, there are, most of the remedies I learned early on for dealing with the thyroid were these seaweeds. It was the idea of getting iodine in the body. But there are other herbs that actually help to regulate the production of thyroid hormones by slowly influencing metabolism over a period of time. And here are some of these remedies that you should also consider. One of them is ashwagandha. And ashwagandha is an adaptogen from India, and ashwagandha has been shown to help boost thyroid hormones, and I believe it also helps with the conversion of T4 to T3. Hoshu Wu does the same thing. In fact, Hoshu Wu is a really good one for Hashimoto's thyroiditis. You take it for about 6 months, and it slowly regulates and normalizes thyroid metabolism. Coleus, which is the little plant pictured here, contains a compound that is used in actually conversion of hormones and production of hormones called CAMP, and it has also been shown to be beneficial for the thyroid. Google is used to up metabolism and help the body burn fats, and it does this partly by helping to regulate and stimulate thyroid production. Interestingly enough, saw palmetto, which we think of primarily in modern herbalism as a remedy for prostate problems in men, is also helpful for regulating the thyroid. And again, like Hoshu Wu, it will slowly help to normalize thyroid function. Also, because the thyroid and the adrenals work hand in hand, a lot of adaptogens, including Schizandra, Eleuthero, and Rhodiola, will also help, taken over time, to normalize the production of thyroid hormones. So it may not be just a matter of putting iodine or L-tyrosine or nutritional cofactors in. Sometimes using some of these other herbs to just gradually get your hormones back into better balance overall are going to be very, very beneficial. Let's talk about some of the thyroid formulas that we have. We're going to talk about TS2 with hops, Target TS2, Thyroid Activator, and Thyroid Support. Now the first one is TS2 with hops. Now this is one of the milder thyroid formulas, one of the ones that's good for kind of a subclinical hypothyroidism. And it's one of the formulas that can actually be very helpful for hyperthyroid as well as hypothyroid, because it has a bit of a calming effect due to the presence of hops, which is a sedative. You notice it contains kelp and Irish moss, which are two of the seaweeds we talked about, a little parsley, which is a source of minerals, and capsicum that stimulates metabolism. I've used TS2 myself on occasion. I found it helps to kind of boost your energy. It can help your body, burn fat if you're trying to lose weight. But even better than TS2 if you're trying to lose weight is Target TS2. Now, Target TS2 contains targeted minerals. Now, what targeted minerals are is that when you digest minerals, the body binds minerals to amino acids to transport them to various places in the body. So by chelating minerals to certain amino acids, it's basically going to take those minerals to those parts of the body. So remember that TSH is made from glutamine, proline, and histidine. So by targeting zinc and manganese, which are mineral cofactors used in the production of TSH, to glutamine, proline, and histidine, that takes those minerals to the thyroid, where those amino acids in combination with those minerals increase the output of TRH and TSH, which increases the stimulation on the thyroid to produce thyroid hormones. So it's going to help increase that thyroid peroxidase. This means that this also seems to me to be a good formula to consider if you've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Now, there were animal studies showing that these targeted minerals actually reduced body fat in animals when they were fed these compounds. So if you're trying to lose weight and low thyroid may be an issue for you, this is a really good supplement to consider. The next one is Thyroid Activator. Thyroid Activator is, I consider it a little stronger formula. It's got 3 iodine-containing herbs: Irish moss, kelp, and black walnut. Again, the parsley. It's also got watercress, which is a sulfur compound, and sarsaparilla, which is a blood purifier. This was John Christopher's thyroid formula. TS2 was Stan Malmstrom's. Just basically, kind of historically, I've understand that TS2 seems to work better for men, and Thyroid Activator better for women as a source of iodine. I know a number of people who've told me that taking this with their thyroid medication, even when they're actually on thyroid medication, actually makes them able to get by on a lower dose of thyroid medication and seems to actually make the thyroid medication work better. So this is a good one to consider if you are already on a thyroid medication. Thyroid Support is a thyroid glandular. So this actually contains the freeze-dried thyroid, which actually contains not only a little bit of the thyroid hormone itself, but more than that, it actually contains all the nutrients present in the thyroid gland. So it actually helps to rebuild the thyroid gland itself. It's one of the strongest of our thyroid formulas. You notice in addition to the thyroid and pituitary glandular, it also contains the L-tyrosine, which is the building block for the hormones, Kelp, which contains that metabolic precursor, zinc, copper, and manganese, and B6, all of which are used in the production of the thyroid hormones. So this really is a very good formula. I've seen very good results with it with a lot of people. It's often a really good idea to take it along with the adrenal support formula. In other words, you're supporting both the thyroid and the adrenals simultaneously, and that often gets you better results than just working on the thyroid alone. Now, there are emotional things surrounding the thyroid. The thyroid sitting at the throat is also linked to your ability to communicate. And so one of the reasons why you may have an emotional thing with the thyroid is you may have difficulty speaking up for yourself or expressing your thoughts and feelings to other people. Or because the throat also sits kind of like joining your head and your heart, your chest area, there may be a disconnect between what's going on in your head and what you're feeling in your heart, and you're not able to communicate that clearly. Now, here's an interesting thing. Years ago, when I was teaching manager school for Nature Sunshine Products, a 4-day school, I would notice that whenever I was kind of like starting to mix up my words, like not be able to say clearly what I was thinking, like you sometimes do those like Freudian slip kind of things where you mean one thing and you say another. And I noticed whenever that would happen, that if I took some TS2, within 15 minutes, I wasn't having that problem anymore, showing that there is a very strong correlation with the thyroid with the ability to communicate clearly. And I think it goes both ways. Strengthening the thyroid increases your ability to communicate, and not feeling like you can communicate actually inhibits your thyroid. So here are some emotional remedies that can help if you do feel that you're having trouble expressing yourself. There's some flower remedies and some aromatherapy which can be helpful here for the thyroid. So larch is one of the ones I use. It's for people who censure themselves and lack the ability to feel confident in communicating themselves. So, when someone goes, and starts to say something, never mind. That's larch. They're like censoring themselves. They're not saying what they think because they're too judging of how other people may react to what they think. Pink monkey flower, which is for fear of expressing your feelings. Trumpet vine, which is lack of vitality and force in self-expression. People who are soft-spoken, kind of shy, afraid to speak up, and so forth. Trumpet vine can help that. In fact, I often use the combination of larch and trumpet vine together for people who have problems speaking. Violet is for people who are kind of shy and they kind of withhold information and are afraid to put themselves out when they're talking to people or in a group. Now, the aromatherapy oils on the other side, interestingly enough, the energies traditionally associated with the throat is blue, and both chamomile and yarrow have a blue essential oil. And if you want to use any of these, red myrtle, myrrh, clove, lemongrass, you just put a few of the drops and rub it in at the base of the throat, and these can actually help to stimulate the thyroid and also help improve your ability to communicate and speak up for yourself. Okay, now we've talked about low thyroid. Now we're going to switch over and talk about hyperthyroid. Now, if in low thyroid, your metabolic engine's running cold, in hyperthyroid, your metabolic engine's running too hot. Your engine is racing. So that's going to make you intolerant of heat. It's going to rev up your metabolic engine, which often results in a rapid or irregular heartbeat. You will have problems gaining weight. In fact, weight loss is one of the symptoms of hyperthyroid. People can just start to waste away because they're burning up everything in their body. Nervousness, irritability, agitation, are associated with this because you're kind of like on edge and revved up all the time. That can actually make you very tired, because your system's racing all the time, never cools down, and weaken your muscles and wind up with difficulty sleeping. When this gets really severe, your eyes will kind of bulge, so they'll kind of poke out of your sockets. Hyperthyroidism is less common than hypothyroidism, but still it affects 20 million people worldwide, again, mostly women. It was the Graves' disease, which is the most common hyperthyroid disorder, was named for Robert Graves, the English doctor who discovered it. But not all patients with hyperthyroid have Graves' disease. Now, the symptoms for Graves include excessive sweating, intolerance of heat, increased bowel movements. By the way, low thyroid can cause constipation, weight loss and muscle wasting, anxiety, nervousness, agitation, irritability, rapid heart rate or irregular heart rate, diminished sex drive, protruding eyeballs, insomnia, eye irritation or sensitivity, increased appetite because you've got to eat a lot to keep up that high metabolism, and chronic sinus infections. Now, one of this is actually a very dangerous condition if left untreated, because basically your heart can get racing so high and your blood pressure going up so high that you basically like burn out your heart, and you burn up your muscles, and you basically kind of waste away. Of course, what happens eventually is if your thyroid is racing like that, it often will collapse and go underactive if that condition consists for a long time. Now, the way the medical doctors treat this condition leaves, in my opinion, much to be desired. One of the therapies is to cut out all or part of your thyroid, called a thyroidectomy. The most common one is to use radioactive iodine, where they give you a pill loaded with iodine that's radioactive. So basically, when you take the pill, it goes into your bloodstream, goes to your thyroid, the radiation kills your thyroid, and boom, you're on thyroid medication for the rest of your life. There are also drugs that you can take which act as thyroid inhibitors. So they basically block TSH receptor sites and inhibit the production of thyroid peroxidase, which then inhibits the production of thyroid hormone. And there's a couple of the drugs listed right there. You know, someone described to me a guy who had hyperthyroid and had the radiation, told me what they did. He says they gave him this pill, which was in a lead-lined container, told him to go into another room, open up the container, swallow the pill. He wasn't supposed to share dishes or laundry with anybody in his family for 2 weeks, but it was perfectly safe. Anyway, I think there's a lot better options than just killing your thyroid. Now, to understand how to treat hyperthyroid, we've got to understand a little bit about what contributes to it. And the things that trigger hyperthyroid include, number one, stress. So the feeling really stressed, really agitated, a lot of pressure is one of the things that's going to kick up that metabolic engine. Smoking can do it. Radiation can do it. Some drug medications can do it, and infections can do it. However, the most common cause is really related to stress. And in Chinese medicine, they didn't recognize hyperthyroid, but they recognized the symptoms of hyperthyroid. And they considered that it was a disturbance of the qi, or the ki, the energy of the body, due to sorrow and anger. And they called it excess heart fire, leading to heart yin deficiency, which includes things like fright, mania, panic, insomnia, excessive talking, and heart palpitations. Or extreme anger producing liver fire. Translating that all into English, basically what they're saying is the person has a lot of emotional disturbance inside that they don't know how to deal with, excessive fear, anger, and so forth, that's kind of increasing their level of agitation to the point that they're always on edge. It's like their pedal is always pushing down on the gas, like they cannot slow down. So natural treatment for this includes the fact that we do have herbs that actually inhibit the thyroid. The two biggest ones are bugleweed and lemon balm. These herbs both contain substances that bind to TSH receptor sites in the thyroid and inhibit the production of thyroid hormone. Rosemary and lemongrass do that also. And you can use the lemon balm or Melissa essential oil, rosemary essential oil, and lemongrass essential oil applied topically to the throat, and use the bugleweed and lemon balm internally to help knock down the thyroid. I've had some good results with quite a few people using those herbs to help bring down the thyroid. Here's another really interesting thing, iodine and the thyroid, hyperthyroidism. Most experts that where I've read people talking about treating this recommend avoiding iodine when you're treating hyperthyroid. However, on doing iodine tests, a lot of people with hyperthyroid are actually low in iodine. So the thyroid is like revving up to grab all the iodine it can. And one of the reasons, well, if you want to try and see if getting the iodine helps, one of the best things to do is start with like TS2 with hops, because it's a milder one and not likely to rev up your metabolism, because the hops helps to calm you down. But Kimberly Ballas has had some training on this and actually went to some classes by Dr. David Brownstein, who's an expert on this. And what she mentions is that if your thyroid was saturated with iodine and you took that radioactive iodine pill, your body wouldn't take up the radioactive iodine. So the very fact that the radioactive iodine treatment works is a sign that the body is low in iodine in Graves' disease or hyperthyroid. Now this makes sense to me because, having grown up and taking some civil defense classes when I was young, and there was all that threat of nuclear attack, one of the things that they kept in nuclear fallout shelters was potassium iodide. Now, potassium iodide, the idea is that when you had nuclear attack, you would take these extremely high doses of potassium iodide. So you would saturate your body with potassium iodide, and then your body would not absorb the radioactive iodine, which would then not kill your thyroid. So that does make sense. If your body was already saturated with iodine, then the radioactive iodine wouldn't work, or at least it wouldn't completely destroy your thyroid. So I actually had one lady who I was working with this condition, who opted to do the radioactive iodine, and I actually encouraged her to take the Thyroid Activator. At that time, I didn't have the iodoral or the iodine supplements. Today, I would do the same thing. And I actually wanted her to saturate her body with iodine, because my idea is that if I could if it would kind of partially kill the thyroid, but I could save it so it didn't completely kill the thyroid, it would go, and it actually seemed to work. I mean, basically what happened is that it wound up taking her thyroid down, but it didn't take it down all the way, and the doctor was kind of like, whoa, what's happened here? So that was kind of an interesting thing. Rapid heart rate is a big problem with hyperthyroid, and so you actually really, really need to use herbs that are going to calm the heart. And one of the big ones is motherwort. So I use a combination of bugleweed, lemon balm, and motherwort as a basic therapy for this. Hawthorn, lavender, mistletoe, which is a harder herb. It's for professional herbalists only, but that can take down blood pressure and heart rate. And lobelia can also take down blood pressure and heart rate. You want to avoid things that are stimulants. So anybody with hyperthyroid should not eat any sugar, should not use any caffeinated beverages. No coffee, no black tea, no caffeinated sodas, no Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper, or whatever, no chocolate. It's also a good idea to avoid wheat, saturated fats, since saturated fats like coconut oil and the fats in meats stimulate the thyroid, and dairy products as well. You also want to support the adrenals. I have a theory that one of the reasons why a lot of people's thyroid goes hyper is because their adrenals are underactive, and the thyroid is trying to counteract the low metabolism from their adrenals. So I always use adrenal supporting remedies with hyperthyroid, which include Eleuthero, adrenal support, and nervous fatigue formula. Now remember, going back to the Chinese indications, they said that this was caused heart yin deficiency. Nervous fatigue formula treats heart yin deficiency. So I've had some pretty good results with using nervous fatigue formula as part of the supportive therapy for this. Here are some other remedies that you can use for hyperthyroid. raw cruciferous vegetables. As I'm going to go through a list of these in a minute, but these foods actually inhibit thyroid function. Also the Chinese formula IFC, which reduces heat, I have found to be very helpful for reducing inflammation in the thyroid gland when there's thyroid inflammation, and it also helps to kind of cool the system down with hyperthyroid. Copper may be one of the things that's deficient in hyperthyroid people, and a good source of copper that's easy to assimilate is to drink liquid chlorophyll. Also, people with hyperthyroid may also be deficient in L-carnitine and selenium, so those are other supplements that may be helpful. Now, I mentioned the cruciferous vegetables. These include broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, turnips, cauliflower, radishes, horseradish, mustard. Basically, they're plants in the mustard family. And the sulfur compounds in these foods actually inhibit the uptake of iodine, especially when eaten raw. But you've got to eat them in rather large quantities. So I would suggest anybody with hyperthyroid basically start including a lot of these foods in their diet. Now, you could, lightly steam some of them, but if you can eat any of them raw, that's going to have the best effect. Now, let's finally deal again with, because the stress is a big component in this. I actually found a lady who was a psychiatrist who got Graves' disease, who basically put up a website about dealing with this, and she feels that the biggest causal factor in this is the stress, the emotional state of the person. And so some of the emotional issues that she associates with hyperthyroid, and I think these makes a lot of sense, is again the inability to speak one's truth, a lack of finding a way to express yourself creatively, to ask for what you want, basically having a stressful, unhappy lifestyle where you're trying to please other people, but you aren't able to communicate your own needs and your own desires. So like you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, doing all these things, but you're really out of tune with what you need and not able to really speak up for yourself, and especially have difficulty saying no. Being able to when something isn't something you really want to do, to say no. So some of the emotional remedies that could be helpful here for the hyperthyroid include deer brush, which is a remedy that helps people convey true intentions. Larch again, which is about speaking up for yourself. Pink monkey flower again, which is fear of expressing your true feelings. And mountain pride is for people who lack assertiveness, lack the ability to speak their own truth, assert their own opinion, and so forth. Now, there are a number of aromatherapy oils that can help here, lemon balm, lemongrass, myrrh, myrtle, the green myrtle in this case, and I actually should have put rosemary on there. Again, these can be applied topically over the throat. They will have a thyroid inhibiting effect, but they will also help with the emotional part of this. We'll end with just a brief thing of thyroid nodules and thyroid cancer. Thyroid nodules are little lumps in the front of the neck on the thyroid. They produce a tight feeling in the throat. They can be associated with coughing, hoarseness, swollen lymph nodes, and pain in the neck and throat, although sometimes they can be asymptomatic. If you have a nodule on your thyroid, the first thing you want to do is determine if it's a nodule or cancer. So you've got to go get medical testing to find out what it is. Kim Ballas told me that thyroid nodules are basically problems with calcitonin, the hormone that regulates calcium. And she's had very good results with this using hydrangea and HSNW, both of which help regulate calcium metabolism and the parathyroid hormones. You also can try your standard things that help reduce cysts and lumps, which are things like blood purifiers, lymphatic drainage, the black walnut, which is again a good source of iodine, but also is a blood purifier, and all-cell detox. But the hydrangea and HSNW seem to be very helpful. Now, if you do find out you have thyroid cancer, know that one of the things that really can cause that is exposure to radiation. You want to work with a competent health practitioner, and if you want information about natural therapy for cancer, we have a DVD on cancer that you can buy and look a lot about natural therapies for cancer. That one features Kim Ballas and myself, and I think Kim has some excellent approaches, natural approaches to working with cancer. So there you have it. Some natural things to do when your thyroid needs that kelp. And I hope that you will really look at this, because again, this is a major problem. When you have 10% of the population, particularly a large percentage of women, so that's a lot larger percentage of women than it is men, since women are the ones who have this problem the most, are having this hypothyroid symptoms without really knowing what it is. This is very valuable information to pass on to people, share with people, and get out to the public so people can know what to do. And also, I really want to encourage you to use some of this information, because being on synthetic thyroid hormones or having your thyroid irradiated for hyperthyroid or whatever isn't always the best solution. And if you can try some of these natural solutions and get your thyroid back into balance naturally, you're going to be a lot better off in the long run. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on our next program.